It happened on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday. The hallway buzzed with the usual pre-class chatter, the sound of lockers slamming shut, and the distant echo of a teacher calling for order. But for 15-year-old Ava Torres, this day would break something inside her, and later, become the day that changed everything. Ava wasn't invisible, but she wasn't popular either. She was the kind of girl who kept her head down, wore oversized hoodies, and avoided eye contact. She had a soft voice, the kind you had to lean in to hear, and a habit of fiddling with her sleeves when she got nervous. She came from a quiet home, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs and did her best to keep them afloat. Ava's world was made of routine, silence, and fear of the 4 girls who ruled the school like a pack of wolves dressed in designer shoes and cruelty. Brielle, the ringleader, was stunning, the kind of beautiful that made teachers ignore the venom in her words. Her 3 shadows, Cassie, Jayla, and Tori, followed her every move, like planets orbiting the sun. Together, they didn't just bully, they hunted. They found weakness and pounced. And for months now, Ava had been their favorite target. It started small. Whispers behind her back, gum in her locker, books shoved off her desk. But slowly, it escalated. They laughed when Ava stumbled in gym class. They stole her spare clothes during swim practice. They mocked her me-downs, her quietness, her mother's job. Each humiliation chipped away at her self-worth, but Ava said nothing. She endured it. Because that's what victims do when no one's watching, when no one believes you. But someone was watching. One day Mr. Kim, the school's new tech teacher, overheard Brielle muttering something cruel in the hallway. He had taught long enough to recognize the signs. He didn't say anything that day, but a thought lingered. What if she's hurting more than she's letting on? So, he did something few teachers ever do. He reached out. Ava, he said gently after class, I've noticed some things. You okay? Ava hesitated, then nodded. But her hands betrayed her. They were shaking. Mr. Kim didn't push. Instead, he asked another question. Would you be okay if we added a small security project in our hallway this week? It's part of a tech initiative, but it might help me understand what's going on. Ava said yes. And just like that, a hidden camera was placed above her locker. Quiet, discreet, legal, and positioned with school permission under a general hallway safety protocol. And that's when everything changed. That Tuesday morning, Ava walked down the hallway as usual. Her hoodie was zipped up, her eyes fixed on the floor. The bullies had waited until the hallway was briefly empty, like wolves who knew exactly when to strike. Brielle smirked. We've got something new for you today, she whispered. Cassie grabbed Ava's arms from behind. Jayla pulled at her bag, and in a horrifying moment, Tori reached for the clasp of Ava's bra under her shirt, scissors in hand. Ava screamed, not out loud but inside. Her body froze, her mind raced. The scissors sliced through the strap. Laughter exploded from the girls. Ava clutched her hoodie tightly, eyes wide with horror. They thought it was funny. A prank, a joke. To them, it was just entertainment. To Ava, it was trauma. What they didn't know was that the hidden camera had caught everything. By the time Ava reached the nurse's office, shaking, broken, and unable to explain what happened, the footage was already being reviewed by Mr. Kim and the principal. The next day, the entire school was called into an emergency assembly. The principal didn't play the footage publicly. This wasn't about humiliation. But he did make it clear that something serious had happened. 4 names were called over the PA: Brielle, Cassie, Jayla. 4 girls walked out, stunned, confused, defiant. They were expelled before their feet even crossed the principal's door. Ava didn't come to school for the next 2 days. But on Friday, something incredible happened. As she walked into the building, head down, something felt different. A quiet wave moved through the hallway. Then someone clapped, just one person, then 2. Then the entire hallway burst into applause. Not because they saw the footage, but because someone had finally said enough. Students who had been silent victims themselves finally saw the power of exposure. Ava didn't smile, not yet. But she stood straighter. Later that month, Ava was asked to speak, anonymously, at a school board meeting about what happened. Her words were read aloud by a counselor. She said, "Pain grows in silence, but so does courage. and I didn't know how strong I was until someone believed me. From that point on, Ava wasn't just the girl who survived bullying, she became the face of a quiet revolution in her school. New policies were introduced, mental health resources were added, and most importantly, students began standing up, not just for themselves, but for each other. The camera may have caught the crime, but it was Ava's strength that exposed the truth. In the end, this story isn't just about bullies or their downfall, it's about what happens when the quietest voice finds its roar. When pain is met with justice, and when one hidden camera, one teacher's instinct, and one girl's courage come together to change everything. Let this story remind us, silence protects no one. But truth exposes, heals, and restores. Be the one who speaks. Be the one who stands. Because someone out there is waiting for you to believe them. And when you do, everything can change. It wasn't just scissors that cut through Ava's bra that day. It was the final tear in the fabric of her silence. For months, she had carried the weight of humiliation like an invisible backpack, full of shame, fear, and questions that had no safe place to land. Why me? What did I do wrong? Will it ever stop? Every morning she stood in front of the mirror, pulling her hoodie tight like armor, hoping it would shield her from their eyes, their words, their games. But you can't hide from cruelty when it hunts you deliberately. What those girls did wasn't a prank, it was an act of control, domination, and disregard for another person's dignity. Ava had endured it all until that day. When the cold metal of those scissors touched her skin, her breath caught, and the world slowed. The hallway had emptied seconds before, like the universe had cleared the stage for an unspeakable moment. Her heart pounded like war drums inside her chest, her eyes darted in panic, but her mouth refused to open. That's what trauma does. It silences the scream, it paralyzes the flight. It forces you into surrender. The girls laughed as if it was some petty joke, as if they'd just tossed paper at her head. But they hadn't. They had violated her, broken her trust in the place that was supposed to protect her, school, a word that should mean safety and growth. Instead, for Ava, it became a war zone. And yet, while the girls walked away thinking they had won, something had already shifted. Justice had already started moving. Hidden above the lockers was a silent witness. That camera, placed not to spy but to protect, captured what no one believed was happening. It exposed the twisted joy in their faces, the force of their actions, the way Ava's body crumpled inward in horror. And it did something Ava had longed for. It spoke for her. It told the truth. When Mr. Kim saw the footage, his hands trembled. He wasn't just a teacher anymore. He became an advocate. He didn't wait. He walked straight to the principal's office and demanded immediate action. And for the first time in Ava's life, someone moved fast for her. The 4 girls were summoned without warning, and when the evidence was shown to the disciplinary board, there was no room for denial. Their smirks faded, their excuses fell apart, and within hours, they were expelled. No drawn-out hearings, no second chances, just accountability. The message was clear: this ends now. But the story doesn't end with their punishment, because Ava's journey wasn't just about what they did to her. It was about what she became because of it. The days that followed weren't easy. Ava didn't suddenly feel healed. She cried herself to sleep more than once. She questioned if people only supported her because they felt sorry for her. But deep down, a small fire had ignited. It whispered, "You are worth protecting." That whisper grew louder each time someone walked up to her and said, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up," or, "You helped me feel brave." Ava started going to counseling. She began writing in a journal, not just about her pain, but about her strength. She wrote about how silence can be its own prison, and how the first person who believes in you holds the key. She wrote about how sometimes you don't need 1,000 people to stand with you. You just need one. One voice to say, "I see you." One heart to say, "You matter." Slowly Ava began to change. Her shoulders sat higher, her eyes met others more easily. She even took off her hoodie one day and wore a simple dress, not to impress, but to reclaim herself. Her classmates noticed, her teachers noticed, and when a reporter from the local news station caught wind of what had happened, Ava was offered a chance to speak anonymously about bullying, trauma, and what it means to fight back without using fists. Her message was clear: being silent doesn't mean you're weak. Enduring pain doesn't make you invisible. Sometimes, surviving is the loudest thing you can do. That video didn't just lead to expulsions. It triggered a cultural shift in the school. Students began coming forward with their own stories. The administration opened new channels for reporting abuse, implemented peer support groups, and hosted assemblies focused on empathy, accountability, and courage. What was once a toxic environment slowly became a space for healing. And at the center of that change was Ava, not because she wanted to be a hero, but because she chose not to disappear. She chose to stay, to speak, to breathe. And that choice inspired others to do the same. Ava learned that the bravest thing you can do after someone breaks you is to rebuild. Not into the person you were before, but into someone even stronger. Pain can do that. It can either poison you or purify you. Ava chose the second, and now her story lives on, not just as a cautionary tale of cruelty, but as a roaring testimony of what happens when justice catches up, when silence is broken, and when a victim finds their voice in the most unexpected way. The worst part wasn't the scissors or the pain, or even the sound of the girls laughing. It was the silence that followed, the kind of silence that wraps around you like a cold fog, making you question whether anyone will believe what just happened. Ava stood frozen in that hallway, her breath caught in her throat, her hands clinging to the edges of her hoodie to hide what had just been done to her. Time moved, but she didn't. Her heart raced, her mind spiraled, and for a moment, she felt like a ghost in her own body. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight. But all she could do was walk away, shoulders hunched, head low, body shaking. When she made it to the nurse's office, she couldn't even speak. The nurse looked at her confused, then concerned. She offered a seat, a glass of water. Gentle questions that Ava could only respond to with nods or tears. But what Ava didn't know was that just down the hall, a video was already changing her future. Mr. Kim sat in front of his monitor, jaw clenched, heart heavy. He had seen bullying before. But never like this. Never this cruel. Never this invasive. He replayed the footage again and again, making sure there was no doubt. Every angle, every expression, every movement, recorded and time-stamped. It wasn't just about catching the girls in the act. It was about making sure Ava never had to explain what was already painfully obvious. When he walked into the principal's office with the footage in hand, he wasn't just a teacher. He was a protector. And when the principal watched, his eyes widened, his hands curled into fists, and all questions about discipline vanished. The decision was unanimous: immediate expulsion, no negotiation, no leniency. 4 students removed from school grounds by the end of the day. 4 lives that had used their influence to torment others finally stopped. But justice isn't a magical cure. It doesn't erase trauma. It doesn't mend a broken spirit in a single day. For Ava, the journey that followed was quieter but more important than any punishment those girls received. She spent the next few days at home, barely speaking, her mother holding her hand at the dinner table in silence, both of them unsure how to put the pieces back together. There were no easy words, no inspirational quotes that could make the pain disappear. But something began to stir, a quiet shift. For the first time, Ava didn't feel invisible. For the first time, someone had believed her without her needing to scream. She had proof. She had backup. She had someone fight for her when she didn't know how to fight for herself. And that realization changed everything. When she returned to school, it was like stepping into a different world. No more jeers. No more cruel notes shoved in her locker. The hallway fell quiet when she walked through it, not out of mockery, but out of respect. Some students whispered. Others looked at her with eyes full of guilt and pity. But one by one, a few of them came forward, offering kind words, apologies, and even their own stories. One girl confessed how she used to cry every night after Brielle's group spread rumors about her body. A boy admitted he had been too afraid to speak up when he saw them push another kid down the stairs. Ava listened to them, not because she needed their pain to validate hers, but because it reminded her she wasn't alone. The story had triggered something far bigger than she expected. She had become a symbol, reluctant, maybe, but real. Teachers became more alert. the school started implementing monthly mental health check-ins. Mr. Kim created a safe tech club where students could use digital tools to support anti-bullying efforts. And Iva, she started to write. In her journal at first, private, hesitant, unsure. But then she began posting anonymous entries on the school's forum, a space where other students could read and share their own experiences. Her words weren't perfect. They didn't need to be. What mattered was that they were honest, raw, brave. In one post, she wrote, "What they did to me wasn't a prank. It was a theft. They tried to steal my dignity, my safety, my peace. But I'm taking it back, one breath at a time." That post alone was shared dozens of times, and soon others joined in. Stories flooded in, some heartbreaking, others empowering. And Iva, the once silent girl who hid in the corners of hallways, became the pulse of a movement she never planned to start. But even as the outside world changed, Iva still had to battle the war inside her. Flashbacks, nightmares, triggers she didn't expect, like the sound of scissors, or the echo of laughter. But this time she had support, counseling, friends, teachers who checked in, her mother, who held her tighter and told her every night how proud she was, and herself, a version of herself that refused to give up. The scars didn't vanish, but they began to mean something. Not just pain, but proof of survival. She learned how to say no, how to speak up, how to look in the mirror and see someone worth defending, and perhaps most powerful of all, she began to help others do the same. When a new girl joined the school mid-semester and rumors started swirling around her, Ava was the first to stand beside her. She walked her to class, sat with her at lunch, and when she saw the familiar glint of mockery in another student's eye, she shut it down with a look that said, "Not here, not again." Because Ava had become more than a survivor. She had become a shield, a quiet protector, a living reminder that cruelty can be stopped, that silence can be broken, and that the smallest voice can echo loudest when it finally decides to speak. What people often don't see is what happens after the camera shuts off, after the bullies are expelled, and after the applause fades away. Because healing is not instant, it's messy, confusing, and often lonely. And that was exactly the place Ava found herself in during the weeks following the incident. She would sit on her bed at night staring at the ceiling, her chest heavy with questions that had no answers. Sometimes her fingers would tremble just folding her clothes because her body still remembered the fear. And even though everyone now saw her as strong and brave, inside she felt like a glass vase barely glued back together. She kept reliving the moment. The sharp sound of the scissors, the laughter, the feeling of helplessness, like she was shrinking inside her own skin. And even though justice had been served, it didn't undo the damage, it didn't stop the nightmares or silence the echoes in her mind. It was like her brain had bookmarked the worst page of her story and kept opening it every time she tried to move on. But healing, as Ava slowly discovered, doesn't come in grand moments. It comes in small, fragile steps, like getting out of bed when everything inside tells you to hide, like showing up to school even when your stomach is twisted in knots, like letting someone sit next to you at lunch and not pushing them away. And one day, in one of those quiet steps, Iva found herself in Mr. Kim's classroom again, not because she had to be there, but because she wanted to. The tech club had started holding meetings after school, and he had invited her more than once, saying she could just observe if she didn't want to speak. So she went, cautiously, her eyes scanning the room, unsure if she belonged. But the moment she stepped in, the noise didn't stop, no one stared, no one whispered. A girl named Naomi just smiled at her and patted the seat beside her, like she had been waiting for Ava all along. And that moment, that small gesture, meant more than any apology or speech. It was a thread of connection, and Iva clung to it. Week by week she returned, slowly opening up, not by sharing her story, but by being present, by learning how to code a website, by helping other students with design ideas, by realizing that she wasn't defined by what had been done to her, but by what she did next. And that shift, that reclaiming of her power, became her quiet revolution. She didn't need to fight with words or confrontation. She fought by growing, by choosing peace over fear. And one day during a meeting, Mr. Kim handed her a folder and said, I think you're ready to lead the next project. Inside was a proposal for an anonymous online reporting system for bullying, designed and developed by the club, and he wanted her to present it to the school board. The idea terrified her, standing up in front of adults, using her voice again in public, but deep down she knew she had to do it, not just for herself, but for every kid who was still suffering in silence. Every student too scared to speak, she stayed up all night practicing, her hands shaking, her voice cracking. But she pushed through, and when the day came, she stood in front of that panel, heart pounding, knees weak, but something had shifted. Her pain wasn't just pain anymore. It had become purpose. She spoke clearly, slowly, every word chosen carefully, and when she finished, there was no applause, just a deep, respectful silence. And then a quiet voice from one of the board members who simply said, "Thank you." The proposal was approved unanimously, and within weeks, the system was live. Reports started coming in, some serious, some small, but all important, all heard. And Ava realized that what she had created wasn't just a website. It was a lifeline, a bridge for the broken, a light in the dark, and for the first time, she felt peace, not because the pain had vanished, but because she had turned it into something powerful, something that mattered. But life still had its challenges. Sometimes she'd overhear people saying she was lucky the camera caught everything, as if justice was luck, not truth. Sometimes students who used to mock her now tried to be her friend, and that felt complicated, like reopening old wounds. And she had to learn how to forgive without forgetting, how to move forward without pretending it didn't hurt, and she did it with grace, not all at once, but little by little. And every time she felt like hiding again, she reminded herself who she was now. The girl who didn't disappear. The girl who turned pain into action. The girl who stood back up. And by the end of the year, she was no longer the girl with the hoodie pulled tight around her. She was the girl with the open laptop, helping others build their voices. She was the quiet leader in the back of the room, guiding with compassion, and she was no longer afraid of the sound of laughter. Because now, it didn't sound like cruelty, it sounded like life moving on, healing, growing, becoming, and Ava knew her scars would never completely fade, but they didn't need to, because they were part of her story, proof that she had walked through the fire and came out stronger. And if anyone ever asked her what saved her, she'd say it wasn't the camera, or the punishment, or the applause. It was the moment she chose to believe she was worth saving. It wasn't just about what happened to Ava, it was about what it revealed, what it stirred up, and what it forced everyone to finally face, because when the footage went around the faculty, when whispers turned to outrage and pity transformed into purpose, the entire school began to shift in ways that no one could have predicted. Teachers who once turned blind eyes started looking more closely, not just at the loud students, but at the quiet ones, the ones who sat in the back, who rarely spoke, who walked the halls with fear etched into their posture, and students who had once followed the crowd, who laughed nervously at jokes they didn't agree with, who stayed silent in the face of bullying, suddenly felt a strange kind of guilt, the kind that doesn't leave until you do something with it. Ava's story didn't just get attention. It opened floodgates, and soon others began stepping forward, not with dramatic stories like hers, but with their own smaller aches, their own moments of isolation, of fear, of being mocked or shamed or ignored, and in that collective vulnerability, something sacred was born. Students started protecting one another, not with fists or fights, but with kindness, with presence, with courage, and for the first time in the school's history, empathy became louder than cruelty, but none of this happened in a straight line. Progress was clumsy, inconsistent. Some days felt like hope and others like setbacks. There were moments when Ava wished she could take it all back, when the weight of being the girl it happened to felt heavier than the act itself. Like when she'd walk into the cafeteria and suddenly everything would get too quiet, too careful, like everyone had a filter on their mouths around her, like she was glass, fragile, untouchable, and it hurt, because all she really wanted was to be normal again. To sit and laugh without wondering if people saw her as brave or broken. But what Ava didn't realize was that she had already become something far more powerful than normal. She had become a symbol of truth, not a perfect one, not a fearless one, but a real one, and the impact of her story began to ripple out even beyond the school walls. Parents started calling the administration, asking about bullying policies. School board meetings were flooded with concerned voices, and the principal, once criticized for turning a blind eye to school culture, was now partnering with Ava and her peers to create a student-led safety task force. It wasn't just paperwork or empty promises, it was students meeting weekly, sharing concerns, reviewing anonymous reports, and creating tangible change in real time. Ava found herself at the heart of it. Not because she wanted the spotlight, but because she knew what silence could cost. She had lived in it, drowned in it, and come out on the other side, and she refused to let anyone else go through it alone. But she also knew she needed boundaries. She couldn't save everyone. She couldn't carry every story, and so she learned to say no when she needed to. She learned that rest was not weakness, that recovery wasn't linear, and that strength sometimes meant stepping back, letting others rise, letting the community carry the mission forward. And they did, beautifully. Students she had never even spoken to started hosting empathy lunches, where anyone could sit at designated tables and be included, no questions asked. Upperclassmen began mentoring freshmen, not just academically but emotionally. The school even created a silent corner in the library, a cozy area with journals, calming lights, and a note on the wall that read, "Hair, your silence is safe, but your story is welcome." And every part of it was touched by Ava's journey. Every small act of kindness echoed the day she decided to stop hiding. And yet Ava still had to battle herself. There were nights she woke up with a pounding heart, memories crashing down like waves, moments when she couldn't walk past her old locker without feeling that cold sensation of being back in that hallway. But over time, she stopped avoiding it. One day she walked by that exact spot and paused, her fingers brushing against the metal door like she was saying goodbye to a ghost. And in that moment, she didn't feel fear, she felt gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the power she found in spite of it. She realized that survival wasn't just about escaping darkness. It was about becoming a light for others, and even though she never asked for that role, she accepted it with quiet grace. Not because she had all the answers, but because she understood the questions better than anyone else ever could. And years later, when Ava stood on a small stage at graduation, chosen to give a student speech, her voice didn't shake the way it used to. She looked out into the crowd and saw her mom, Mr. Kim, her classmates, even a few of the former bullies who had since written letters of apology and spent time in programs designed to help them unlearn their behavior. And she didn't speak of revenge or pain. She spoke of transformation, of what it means to fall and still rise, to be broken and still choose love, to be afraid and still speak. And when she finished, the applause wasn't just for the speech. It was for the story, the journey, the choice she made that day to not let what they did define her, but to let how she responded define the future. Because Ava had become more than a survivor. She had become a catalyst, and in doing so, she proved that even the deepest wounds can lead to the most powerful healing when we allow ourselves to be seen, to be heard, and to be held.